this is Nettie, your green glamour stylist and makeup artist.
And I'm Tanis, your organic beauty scientist, Kundalini yogi, and raw vegan.
We are both licensed estheticians.
And together we are
Mindful Eve. Hi everyone.
Welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is about mindful nutrition.
Yes, and that's really important as women because I think we've always been kind of mindful of our nutrition, whether or not we're really trying to be mindful.
Correct. And we're very excited to have Athene Farmas come.
From Food Love Freedom, she is a certified holistic wellness coach.
Correct. And her tagline is, when your food story ends, your love story begins.
Yes, and it's not quite the love story that comes to mind. She has a really interesting philosophy, which we are excited to dive into. We hope you enjoy today's episode and learn something new. We're going to talk to her on the couch and get in the kitchen as well. So tune in. So here we are with Athene Farmas. Welcome. When you go on to Food Love Freedom, the one thing that caught my eye was kind of like the tagline that says, when your food story ends, your love story begins.
And just to clarify, the love story that I speak of is not the one that involves a Prince Charming and this fairy tale. It really is capital L, capital S, and it's the love story of oneself. And that thereby beginning this journey of healthy living and eating. So it becomes from a place of self-love.
So growing up, the food pyramid for us, as it was taught to us, was, the base was tortillas and crackers and breads and grains. And then recently it's like, no, carbs can't be the foundation of, your diet. And everything's changing right now, Athene. So for you, what are the primary foods that you focus on in your diet?
So primary foods for me actually have two components. And when I speak of primary foods, I actually think about foods that nourish us that don't come on a plate. So I think about the areas of life that include relationships, our spirituality, our connection to something greater than you and I, whatever that is.
A spiritual connection.
Yes.
That wasn't on the food pyramid.
No.
These things were not presented on the food pyramid.
Not at all.
And those are some of the major things in life that feed us.
Yes.
Right?
And what about how we use our time and talent on this planet? Because we could be eating right and doing everything right by the book, kale and green juice all day, and yet you hate your job and you hate your boss and your colleagues. Okay, you spend more time, 40, 50, 60 hours in some cases, with these people in this type of setting, and yet you're wondering why the weight loss isn't really happening. I'm doing everything right. I'm working out. I'm going to the gym. I'm eating. But you're in this environment. Also, movement practice. I noticed they didn't say workout. It's really about...
There's no working out on the food pyramid either.
No. Exactly. Integrating a healthy way of just moving your body on a daily basis. Not necessarily, going for the burn or how many calories. And lastly, for women, pleasure. Having that as a primary food. And what I mean by pleasure is not something, it doesn't relate to the bedroom. It's really about what gives you a sense of joy. What is, when you do this one thing, it's like time lapses, okay? And I'll give you an example. My mom, for instance, her pleasure zone is gardening, okay? She loves to get out there on her knees, digging dirt, planting. It's her pleasure zone, and she could be out there for hours, okay? For me, it's a perfectly good way to ruin my manicure. Not interested, thank you very much. But the thing is, she has this clarity about what it is that when she goes out there, she feels rejuvenated and replenished. And it's important for women to have these sources of pleasure in their life, because if we don't, the quickest way to get pleasure is through food.
So feeding our own personal fire, not using food. Right, just feeding us, stoking it, and nourishing ourselves.
Yes. And that's our primary food. And so things that come on a plate become secondary.
Exactly. Because when you're fed in all these other areas, and we've been there, when you first fall in love, right? Yeah. And you're just like so fed by his words and his affection and his attention. And you're not even hungry. You can go like, oh my God, I've gone hours and hours and hours without eating. And yet, why is that? Because you are being fed in a different way. And there's something to be said about that.
Speaking of finding that pleasure place as women and embracing our sensuality, what are some specific things that we can do as women to find that thing that's going to tap into feeding that part of our primary foods? Any particular tips that we can embrace?
Yeah, I think that, making the space, like if you don't know and if you're thinking, well, I don't know what my pleasure, taking the time to actually explore that. And one of the things that I think is really important is having a morning practice. So when you wake up in the morning, to, even if you have to be at work by a particular time, to wake up maybe 15 minutes earlier than your alarm clock goes off, be in silence, meditate, maybe journal or read something inspirational. So, that morning time, I believe it to be very sacred. It creates a portal for the magic of the day to unfold. It's like you're giving to yourself first before you could actually give to other people. And
so what about those times when you're learning, right? You're learning how to change your mindset. You're learning how to date yourself. And we are all creatures of habit. So maybe those old habits creep back in, maybe in times when you're really, really stressed out, or maybe you're in party mode or something like that. Is there anything that you can do that can reel you back into that?
Yeah, do you have a specific technique
place
that you can share with us?
Yes.
Do you take a personal time out? Do you step away? What do you do when you just know you're going down a road that's not going to, help you flourish?
Yeah, absolutely. And self-sabotage comes up oftentimes when we're committed to a particular vertical path of wellness. Okay, we're on this this constant evolution of becoming a better version of ourselves, and oftentimes disordered eating or binging will come up as a form of self-sabotage, because it's like, wait a minute, I've been feeling so good. Can you allow yourself to actually feel so good and be so good and look so good? It's like giving ourselves permission. So just sort of noticing, what is that about? And then in terms of recalibrating and resetting, when you have these practices in place, and that's why it's so important. That's why the emphasis for me is not so much about the food as it is about having these practices in place. When you have these habits, the next morning you're starting over again, and really it starts the next minute that you recognize, like, oh, okay, what am I doing here? Okay. So it's not waiting until Monday to start, again. Because I remember, like, Monday was always like a big thing for me. Like, okay, I'm just going to go crazy on the weekend, and then come Monday, I was like going to redeem all my food sins. It's really about, again, bringing that consciousness and having these tools in place where maybe you sit down and journal for 15 minutes, pen to paper. Don't even let it, don't even look up until you've been journaling. Set a timer for 15 minutes. And what is within you that is causing this behavior? Nobody else can answer that.
So it comes back to mindfulness.
Yeah,
taking the time to be mindful and then reflecting on that.
And forgiving and being quick to forgive. Because especially if you've been perfect up until a certain point, and then something comes up, and it was like, okay, I just ate a bag of whatever, or polish this off, to forgive oneself and let it go. Because I think that is part of it. That's part of, releasing weight is very related to self-forgiveness. And the sooner that we can say, okay, that happened, and I'm now starting in this next minute, this next moment of awareness, the minute you get conscious, that's when, you just forgive and let go.
So speaking of consciousness, I like to try and get a little bit mindful before I even walk into a grocery store. And I kind of have a little technique that I use so I don't walk out with a basket full of cans. And what I do is I go to the produce section first, pile in all that fresh produce, and then it's kind of hard to put cans and bags and stuff on top. You don't want to smash the produce, and hey, your cart is full anyway, so I might as well check out. So what would you recommend as a very practical thing when someone's walking in a grocery store? And like, how do you tackle that grocery store?
Well, definitely don't go to the grocery store when you're famished, because then you're just going to end up getting whatever's in front of you, and you may even just be opening a bag and eating while you're going around the grocery store.
Been there, eating and shopping. Put it in the mouth, put it in the cart, and pretty much anything's going to end up in your mouth.
Right, or if you, depending on where you go to the market, if there's the people with the samples. And you're more susceptible to saying yes, even though it's probably something you wouldn't normally eat, but because you're hungry.
You're
So
super
just
hungry.
again, just making sure that you are fed and nourished before you actually go into the market. Become really diligent about reading labels. I think that food companies have become very smart about how they market their products, and you'll see something that says natural. Well, don't believe it, okay?
What does natural mean?
What does that mean? Okay, if it's naturally flavored, that in itself is not that
Right.
is
That's
So wait a minute, it's naturally flavored. So really become a food detective and learn to read labels, learn to recognize sugar. I think that's one of the biggest detriments. Sugar's in everything, but now food companies are smart. They're not just saying sugar.
so many names.
There's so many names. So I actually have a list of, ways to recognize sugar on the label, because you will not see it listed as sugar.
Right.
So it's really important to see how it's being snuck into the food.
Right. And even sugar substitutes, even natural sugar substitutes like stevia, we now know can still spike an insulin response.
Yes.
So, we have to be careful about just not the sugars, the fake sugars, and, just be mindful and look at that. I love that, food detective.
That's really important. At the very least, taking a quick glance to see what are the ingredients and how long is the list. Can you pronounce what you're reading? If you're having difficulty pronouncing, your body is likely going to have difficulty digesting it, and when it doesn't know what to do, it just stores in a tissue. And because it's a foreign food, it's something that may be chemically, synthetically engineered in a lab somewhere. Fat is a way of keeping us safe.
Protecting it, kind of like
Protecting.
encapsulate all these weird things, and let's just hold it here, in this little safe, fat compartment that happens to exist on my butt.
Our body's about it's about it's survival, right? And so really the fat serves as a survival mechanism.
So at the end of the day, if you're seeing the weight is packing up on the scale, it's probably an inclination that, hey, your body's going into protection mode because you're taking in a lot of poison, essentially.
Or your cortisol's high because of stress. Again, it's going to go into protection mode, and it's going to hang on to that.
Yes.
Okay, so Athene, what do you have for us today?
So we had spoken earlier about integrating more fat into the diet, and one of the ways in which you can do that is really even in your morning drink. Whether you're drinking coffee or if you're a tea drinker, you could add coconut oil, which provides a healthy dose of fat, and it's extremely nourishing. Our brains are at least 60% fat. So when you start off your morning with a good amount of fat, you are not only provided with the energy, but also your brain power is switched on. So I really like this sort of butter coffee or tea. It's up to you, and we can make both versions, just depending on what you ladies prefer. If you are going to make a tea, I recommend that you do something with a strong taste profile. This is a traditional masala chai, a chai tea. Like okay, great. So we'll do this one because it has a very strong taste, and it won't get diluted with the butter. You can't do like a chamomile or even a green tea. You can do a matcha green tea if you do it with a green tea powder. So just keep that in mind, that you may want to also, if you do like a Earl Grey or an English breakfast, that perhaps you let it steep longer so it gets really strong, and then make it with the way that I am going to show you. So this one is just a powdered, the brand is Blue Lotus Chai, and it's very, let you smell it, it's really nice.
Okay, so there's a little scoop in there.
Yeah,
so
there's a little
3,
scoop.
4.
Yes.
Okay.
About 4 for 2 servings. So go ahead and smell
Oh
that.
my, that smells delicious.
Wow.
Yeah, and I might even add a little bit more. I'm really not so much about, I like to taste as you go along and adapt it if you want. And then I'm going to add, since this is a double serving, this is about 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. I did wash my hands. No, not for right now. We're just going to do the coconut oil. You could also make it with butter. This is the vegan version of it. So this water here has already been boiled.
That's going to help melt the coconut oil, so we don't have to be concerned about trying to pre-melt it or anything like that.
Right. And if I always like to add a little bit of sweetener as well. I like using stevia because it's a non-glycemic, although there's maybe some controversy around whether it raises the glycemic index. You know, everybody's different. For me, stevia works really well. I prefer the liquid stevia because it's easier to control versus just throwing in powdered stevia. And if you don't like the taste of stevia, I found that people that don't like the taste of stevia, it's because they've often overdone it. Stevia is a very concentrated sweetener, plant sweetener, and a little bit goes a long way. If you treat it like sugar and just dump a teaspoon, it's like you're not going to like the taste of it. So with stevia, I like to just err on the side of caution, and I'm just going to put in 4 drops. And then you could always change it later on. So we've got the tea, the coconut oil, and we're going to go ahead and blend it. Now, this is a really important step because you can't just drop the coconut oil in your cup and just stir it. It's not going to have the same effect. By blending it, it's going to create a nice froth. So you can see how that created the frothiness.
very short time.
Yes.
Oh, wow, that looks great.
So I just want you to taste this and see.
Yeah, that looked like it did the job.
Makes me want to turn on the fireplace and.
Yeah, I know. It looks creamy.
It looks creamy.
Okay.
You get the pink and you get the blue because it matches your outfit.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So try it. See what you think.
To coconuts.
Yes. So again, you're getting a nice
Oh,
dose
wow. Yeah. That's
fat
fantastic.
with your drink.
So smooth.
So I guess
Yeah.
after you drink something like this, because of the fat content in here, you feel full. You feel
Yes.
satisfied.
Yes.
Right. So this is
and I
brain
think the
power.
most important word is nourish. You're going to definitely feel nourished by having this in the morning. What I often do, will have this in the morning and not really actually break my fast until noon or 1 o'clock when I actually have my lunch. Like this will sustain you because you're getting a good amount of fat in there. So typically if I make mine with coffee, I'll add a tablespoon of grass-fed butter. This is really important that you're doing grass-fed unsalted butter. And I'll also do a tablespoon of coconut oil. And sometimes, you could play around with it, add cacao powder or different things. But it just, for me, it really is a way of satiating myself in the morning and not having to focus so much on like, what am I getting? It's not about food until like later on. So I really love having this as a morning ritual.
I think this is great because I tend to be just a coffee drinker in the morning. And then a couple hours later, I'm starving.
Of course.
So this is
you are.
really great to add to my regular routine, and it won't seem like I'm stepping out of what I'm used to. So I really like this.
Okay.
Now, would you recommend, now we know that this has caffeine, but if you were to use like a strong tasting tea that did not have caffeine in, would you recommend drinking something like this at night? Like
yes,
maybe
you can do something
meal?
like this at night. Definitely. There's a rooibos, which rooibos is a red tea, and that has very low to little caffeine.
Okay.
And this company actually does make a rooibos tea, and so you can make it in the evening for perhaps a post-dinner little treat and add a little, chocolate powder to it, or just in itself, adding the sweetener to it. Right. So definitely, I would say it's a great option for the evening.
Right, I try not to eat after dinner, but sometimes, there might be a special occasion, you have the fireplace going, or you want to, settle down with a good book, and this seems like it would be a perfect accompaniment to that.
Absolutely. Yes,
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
To Beauty and Brains.
Yes.
So tasty, creamy, yummy.
Yes. I feel full already. It's like I don't want to stuff my face. Yeah.
Very satisfying.
Yeah. We hope you loved today's episode. And if you want to learn more about Athene Farmas, please click on the link below, mindfuleve.com, where you can get more information about today's recipe as well as
a downloadable from Athene.
Right.
Beat the Belly Bloat Blues. 9 ways to shrink your belly without doing a single sit-up.
I want to learn that.
Yeah, we're all about that.
I don't want to do any sit-ups.
Right. So click on the link, go to our website, Mindful Eve, learn more about Athene, her recipe, and go get her downloadable.
Yes, and remember, whatever you do,
Do it mindfully.